girls who were associated with Boko Haram or perceived to be associated with Boko Haram. Most of these girls and young women were interviewed during 2 research trips to Maiduguri in 2023. Others were interviewed during 2 research trips, one in late 2019, one in early 2020, to both Borno and Adamawa states. A few others were interviewed remotely in November of 2020 and in April of 2024. In addition to interviews with survivors, Amnesty interviewed 44 other people, both in 2023 and 2024, including Boko Haram survivors who were adults when they were abducted and thus witnesses to what the girls underwent, 2 family members of girls who had been abducted, human rights defenders, members of civil society, lawyers, UN staff, and NGO staff working with children in the northeast of Nigeria. And Amnesty International also interviewed members of the diplomatic community working on the northeast. To supplement the interviews, this research is based on a thorough literature review of over more than 100 documents, including academic journals, UN reports, media articles, and UN resolutions. The Nigerian military has referred to our sources as intrinsically unreliable. As you can tell, our sources were primarily survivors. They speak from their own experiences and they are experts on what they went through. Calling them intrinsically unreliable shows a lack of respect that the Nigerian military seems to have for these Boko Haram survivors. In the report, and during this press conference, we refer to these survivors with scrambled initials, and this is to protect their identities. So an enormous number of girls have been abducted by Boko Haram throughout the years. Many of them were forced into marriage and trafficked, and then subjected to years of sexual violence, ranging anywhere from a few days to actually 10 years. And forced pregnancy. For instance, H.A., abducted from her village and imprisoned with 5 other children, told Amnesty International she witnessed Boko Haram kill 2 girls for refusing to marry. She said, "2 among us disagreed. They were a bit older. They, Boko Haram, killed the 2 girls that disagreed. All kneeling down, they just killed them immediately with a gun. With that, when we saw that, we all agreed to the marriage." N.M. was a teenager when her husband started subjecting her to sexual violence, including rape. She told Amnesty International, "My Boko Haram husband decided to get married again because he said I was a child, and that any time he wanted to have sex with me, I would shout. I would cry and shout and tell him, I don't want it, I don't want it. Because any time he was having sex with me, I would have serious place in my lower abdomen." As Mr. Sanusi mentioned, many underwent an opaque screening process after bravely escaping or being rescued from Boko Haram. The screening process does not identify them as victims of forced marriage or sexual violence. Rather, it perceives them to be Boko Haram wives. 31 survivors who Amnesty International interviewed experienced further abuse and prolonged detention and unlawful detention in military barracks, though this practice has reduced in recent years. Unique to girls' and young women's experience in prolonged unlawful detention was being detained with the babies and the children that they gave birth to during their captivity. Witnessing children die in detention and being subjected to certain insults by soldiers and members of the Civilian Joint Task Force, calling them Boko Haram wives and accusing them of killing people. For instance, E.E., who was abducted when she was a girl and unlawfully detained by the military in 2021 or 2022, told Amnesty International, "Soldiers asked, 'How can I go to the bush and get married to a man in the bush?' A soldier said he likes me. He wanted to marry me." NV was around 20 when she escaped after 8 years of Boko Haram captivity in 2021. She was unlawfully detained by the Nigerian military in Madagali, Adamawa State, for about 2 months. She said, "When the soldiers brought us food to eat, they gave us a portion in our hand and soup in one bowl for all of us to share. They would measure the quantity of water that they would distribute to all of us to drink. As a toilet, they gave us a plastic bag. After we used it, we would throw it away." The abuses that these girls and young women have lived through, and the stigma that has been associated with being a Boko Haram associated, has given rise to very distinct legal, health, livelihood, and educational needs. All girls that Amnesty International spoke with, and as well as young women, lacked access to livelihood, to education, to justice, and to healthcare. Many felt neglected by their government. AV returned from Boko Haram captivity in 2021, aged around 15, now lives in Madagali. She said, "Most people in the government don't care about us. We need support." They expressed desires to become financially dependent, to take care of themselves, their babies, and their families. They wanted to enroll their children in school. Many identified access to education as their top priority, said they wanted to become doctors, nurses, teachers, and lawyers, even to work for non-governmental organizations. SB, who spent around 10 years in Boko Haram captivity, said, "I want to start my life afresh. There are so many things, I don't know where to start." One place to start is for the Nigerian government and its international partners to involve these girls and young women in planning and developing increased support to allow them to rebuild their lives. Thank you for your attention.
Nigeria, to welcome you to this very important but silent issue that our women and girls have been going through in the hand of terrorists and criminals in Nigeria. Unfortunately, not much attention has been given to this inhuman condition that our girls and women find themselves in Nigeria. You recall that a lot of these young women, they were not only abducted in a peaceful manner, but in a very brutal and forceful manner, and forced into illegitimate and illegal so-called marriage. And as a result of that, a lot of them, like you rightly heard, who tried to resist this post-marriage were killed. Many of them maltreated, brutalized. So Amnesty International decided to, once again, remind the authorities and the Nigerian people about this inhuman situation, brutal, violent violation of our girls and women rights that have been going on over years. And yet we have been told that Boko Haram has been defeated, and these atrocities have not yet stopped, and nobody has been brought to book. So today I have the honor to join all of you to bring the attention of the international community and Nigerian authorities as well as Nigerian people this very important research work that is dedicated to exposing injustice and seeking justice for victims of human rights violations and abuses in the Northeast. The report is about girls and women who post Boko Haram atrocities and also face violation in the hands of the military. The girls need to help rebuild their lives and help for them to actually have a sense of decency. The unfortunate thing is that it is not only the state actors that were involved in this inhuman maltreatment, but also people within the state actors were also involved. And that is why we want the authority, at least even if they are not able to fish out those who were involved within the non-state actors, but within the state actors that perpetrated this kind of evil thing, they should be called to order and they should be faced meet the necessary punishment to avoid further, escalation of this kind of situation. This research builds on Amnesty International years of documentation and research since the beginning of Boko Haram conflict. You remember we have issued a lot of reports regarding the crisis that Boko Haram had plunged the entire northeast, and in fact now extended it to other parts of the country. And yet, with all sorts of billions of dollars, we are not able to defeat, I believe, groups that are not more than maybe 3% of our population. Nigeria has over 250 million people. How many Boko Haram do we have? And yet we spend that huge amount of dollars and naira, and yet we are not able to substantially, level these people. They are still having their way. Just last week, they killed people in Niger State. They are terrorizing people, still abducting women and children. You recall that up to now, many young girls that have been abducted from secondary schools are still in captivity. No much effort by a politician. Our political class, they are not interested because they are not their children. If they are their children, by now they should have made necessary effort to ensure that these girls are released safely. But it's like, it's normal. And yet they can even go to those places and do campaign during election. But it is difficult to control them. It is difficult to rescue these innocent young women, whom many of them die as a result of this, unnecessary pregnancy, because their age is not even matured enough to have babies. All these are going on, and the country appears to be keeping quiet. This is not acceptable, and for us in Amnesty International Nigeria, we'll continue to raise this issue. We'll continue to demand justice for these victims of human rights violation in Nigeria. Amnesty International will continue to work with other Nigerian NGOs to push for human rights agenda in this country. Human rights is very important and vital, not only for non-state actors, but even for the state actors, who they have also been attacked by these same terror groups. The terrorists have been also killing police. They have been killing Nigerian army, which means that something is wrong in the security architecture, and that is why we have been calling for security sector reform, because we cannot allow our even security personnel. So if our security personnel are not protected, then how do you protect the non-state actors, the civilian, the women, the children, the disabled? How will we be able to protect them? So it's like it's a business. Insecurity has been a big business in Nigeria, and it's a shame. We must do everything possible to rescue our people. Amnesty International is interested in saying that those who have perpetrated these atrocities and inhuman condition against our women and children are fished out and punished. That's the only way it will serve as deterrent. Otherwise, it will continue to be business as usual. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Trustees and Management of Amnesty International Nigeria, I welcome you to this event and urge you to devote time to read the report, to have a bigger picture and all details that made up the substance of the investigation. We wish you a happy reading, and we will soon be unveiling the report, which we will join you to join us to unveil it for the sake of our young women and children and women generally who have been victim of this terror group in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Take your time and read the report, because the details are very useful. So don't rely on the headlines only. I'm sure if you take your time and read it, you will learn a lot from it. The report is based on interviews, and it had also concentrated on Borno and Adamawa. Later, my colleague is going to say more about the number of people we interviewed and the number of girls we interviewed for the report. Along with their international partners, the Nigerian authorities must support these girls and young women as they fully reintegrate into the society by prioritizing access to health care, education, and vocational training. They must also get assistance that they need to rebuild their lives and dignity. Amnesty International, with this report, is calling on the Nigerian authorities, the UN agencies, donor governments to urgently make available tailored reintegration services for these girls and young women, while ensuring other affected groups are not left behind. Amnesty International is also calling on the Nigerian authorities to ensure that these girls and young women have a meaningful alternative to being returned to their Boko Haram husbands. This is a very serious issue that we believe that should be looked into, because even though this matter has been in the news for a couple of times, but we have taken our time to extensively look at it and its implication. Is it right to think that there was marriage between them, given the circumstances? I think this is something for all of us to think about in view of the atrocities and the manner in which they were abducted in the first place. So at this point, I would like to once again, on behalf of Amnesty International, thank you all for coming here. And I would also, at this point, hand over to my colleague, Nikki Frederick, Crisis Response Researcher, Amnesty International, who is going to take us through